So, on Thursday, October 24th, 2024, at SelectCon in New York, Joe Budden sat down with Steve Stoute for an in-depth mogul talk conversation. They discussed what real ownership means and why it's so valuable. Joe pivoting from the music space to podcasting and the future of media, from how artists interact with their fans and to AI's impact and so forth. That interview is available on YouTube. But this particular clip here is about artists in the music business. It's something that we have kind of talked about in the past a little bit, but it's kind of funny because it's like Joe Budden telling Steve Stoute that some artists are just comfortable getting effed. And he's he said we should leave space for that.
You feel like artists must now be ambidextrous. They have to be able to do their craft, but also have a business mind?
I say yes, but we should leave that lane open for the people that are just comfortable getting Hey, I'm an artist only. You gotta know what you're saying when you say that. That means I don't never wanna talk about back end. That's what it means. And you can't be having a conversation about wealth if you never wanna talk about a back end. So yeah, you probably should get ambidextrous. You probably should learn to be both. This is the era where the artists are learning that they are the business. See, we didn't know that in our era. And if you are the business, then you can't pass that off to someone.
There were very few artists. Coming up in the 90s and 2000, there were very few artists that actually understood the business. They wanted to be artists. They hired their man from the neighborhood who was their manager, and that was the package that would go in and negotiate a deal and do whatever. And the record companies obviously took advantage of that. Today's artist, today's podcaster, whatever you're doing in the internet economy, you need to be able to be mindful of your business. It's your responsibility. You gotta hire a good team. You gotta identify a good team. You also have to do your craft. It's not like it's an option unless you are going to get
Well, I mean,
Thoughts?
We have talked about this in our own way. And, I've made the point on more than one episode of this podcast is there are some people who are looking to be famous and some people who are looking to be rich. All right. And now we have a lot of artists who are, to Joe's point, understand being ambidextrous. I hope I didn't mess that word up.
I think he did, but
yeah,
it's
hey,
okay.
It's all good.
Ambidextrous.
And you have to have, okay, what are my points? What do I get here? What is this brand deal? How much am I paying to a manager? How much am I paying to an agent? What are my points looking like? How many points do I even have? There are a lot of people who just didn't worry about that at one point because they're like, do I get to be at the MTV Awards? Because that was the only thing that really mattered. Do I get to be on stage with TLC? That'd be great.
That would be great.
And so it is a point that we've kind of made before because a lot of people who get into this business, not so much now, but back in the day where there's always the same story. It was like, well, I didn't know anything about publishing. I didn't know anything about brand deals. I didn't realize that, the people that were making my deals were taking 80% of my money. When we talk about, how NWA and they weren't getting the money they were supposed to get, and that's what wound up breaking them up. We talk about how New Edition come off the road and they only have $1.87.
Yeah,
these are the stories that we've heard over and over again. I don't like now. I see rappers who aren't selling anything, but somehow they have all this money and they're flying private and they have all these chains and are buying $5 million houses. Somebody's wised up a little bit and figured some of this stuff out. I'm not saying everybody, but I do think there are some artists who. I see them. If you give them a watch and a chain and a Range Rover, they'll be like, oh man, I'm not trying to hear all that. I'm on tour. I'm getting $10,000 a walkthrough, and they think that's real money, and they don't understand that, like their shelf life is so short that, we're going to be like saying, oh man, what happened to so-and-so in 2 years? And there's got to be no avenue for them to get anything close to the money that they're supposed to have received.
One of the things that he also talked about on this was, specifically with Joe, was how Joe mentioned that he really wasn't getting paid a lot early on for the Everyday Struggle stuff, even though the Everyday Struggle was what the Everyday Struggle was. It was a kind of a monumental podcast in a way. And even the Joe Budden podcast and the stuff that he was starting, he was like, yeah, we weren't getting paid for anything and up front. He's like, the thing that you kind of have to learn is like that we had to learn, and he said it kind of mirrors the artistry in the podcast space, was that, you get what you put into it. Like you can have a podcast and you just be on the podcast and you can just do stuff, but there's so many other things outside of just talking on a podcast that you need to do for the podcast to be good.
Yep.
And so it also goes to Jay's point where it's like, do you just want to be famous? Do you just want to sit on the podcast and talk? Or do you want to be successful and you want to put in the work behind that goes involved in the podcast? And that is a very good mirroring of everything in the creative space in general.
Yeah.
Because you can't just show up with something that you're trying to create from scratch that nobody, unless you have the budget and all these other things, you can't just show up and do the thing a few times and expect to have something. There's so much work that is involved in the behind the scenes, the ambidextrous aspect of it, right? Of being able to do multiple things outside of just the thing that you want to do. For example, us talking on the show as opposed to us doing all the things behind the scene. Is the same as an artist creating music, but also spending time to develop all the things that they're doing behind the scenes as well, and having a content creation system set up to get your stuff out there and all this stuff like that. So we've talked about this before, but that was the other aspect that he was kind of leaning on as well. So
I'm gonna take this kind of from the artist point of view, being the artist that only wants to focus on their work. Now that's respectable in a sense for those who are actually artists versus somebody that wants to get on just to be seen or have your homies think you doing some, or even people across the country just because you pop up here and there at a club appearance and you look like you doing something. I think this is more geared towards an actual artist who has no concern about the business end. It's almost like this is a wake-up call. You need to be smarter and learn about that business end, or have people in your corner that are going to do those jobs for you so that you can focus on the music career.
Yeah,
because sometimes
building a team is what he said as well.
Yeah.
It's like you have to be able to build the team out to do the things that you need. So
because sometimes the music might be the only thing that you have that's going to translate to people. And if you have to focus on the other things, then it's taken away from the thing that you actually know how to do. So I understand what he's saying as far as some people are comfortable being in a position to pretty much, you know what I'm saying, get played or get a bad record deal or whatnot, because they're so in tune with that music. It's almost like an idiot savant. They don't really care about getting paid. They just want to be there, but somebody's getting paid off of it.
Yeah.
So you got to be smarter. You got to be smarter and have those people in your corner. They're going to help you. Like you said, the team help you build in order to make sure that you're not getting at the end of the day.
I think the artists that are so involved with their music is a good thing. Because usually they put out good product when they're focused on their product. But like you all have said, everybody has said, it's very important to understand both sides. But I like the team concept. Even if I'm the type of person that will still stick my head in to understand what's going on, but you have to also be comfortable with the people that you hire for your team. So if you have enough people around you that know more than you, but you can trust them first and foremost, and that makes it that much easier for you to go lock back in. So I don't think it's bad, especially now, for the artist to, quote unquote, go into the meetings. I think that's dope. But as you continue to build a team and less of that happens, I think you can get back to who you actually are, which is just the artist. Like, that's how I would approach it. Like, I want to learn, but eventually I want to be able to trust the guys around me to say, look, we already know what the back end is going to look like, so I can get back to this product.
And that was kind of Joe's point of the whole thing, was Steve asking him, and he said, some artists are just comfortable getting effed, right? So it's like,
yeah,
like it's like Joe says, like, then you just don't care about the back end. Like, like Terry said, the idiot savant thing. It's like, I know talented people that don't put any type of thought at all into the thing that they're doing to generate something. And it's like, that's fine and dandy if you just want to like be in your own little world and do your thing. But if you want to do anything outside of that, like at that point, when you decide to not be proactive about those things, that's also where you have to, like, you don't get to care anymore about the other things either.
Right.
It's like, nah, that's a wrap. You're just somebody that goes out and does it and doesn't care about that. But if you want to build wealth, that's a different conversation. If you want to build some sort of leverage, some sort of thing bigger than yourself, and and all that stuff, then it takes,
because a lot of these artists that were in that era where it wasn't quite right yet, paperwork wasn't quite right, they're not receiving what they should be receiving now because of that. So that's the lesson, like they were talking about. That's the lesson.
Yep.
So if you want it 30 years from now, when you want everything to still be set up, like Jay Moore said, we've alluded to that over and over again, that bad paperwork. We just talking about that earlier. Yeah. Stick your head in there and learn what's going on. Know where your money's coming from and where it's going. You have to.
Look, so many people have just been happy to be paid in fame.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's you'd be like, oh, well, look, I got the gift bag and then, oh, I did get this money from the door.
Yeah.
But money from the door is not, what you would call, money while you sleep money. That's where you're publishing your songwriting and the things that wind up getting signed away. That's how, sometimes these artists look up and they're like, man, I wish if I'd have just paid a little bit more attention. Like, I saw an interview with, of all people, Young MC.
Yeah.
And he talked about, some of these things. And it's like, he eventually got it right.
Yep.
But here he is writing hits for Tone Loc and himself for Delicious Vinyl. And it's just like, hey, but I'm signed to somebody who signed to somebody who signed to somebody. And, I'm looking up and it's 18 months later and I haven't seen a check.
It's a legendary story of Michael Bivins when they were talking about, when they showed it in the movie.
New Edition story.
Yeah, thank you. Well, he was like, what is this and who is this? And they explained to him, this is the music business. You guys are signed to. So it's cut before you guys get it. And he turned around and became a mogul because they hated that feeling. And now, you said this a few weeks ago, now they are here getting that back pay because they didn't have it right back
Well,
then.
I mean, and finally, when they learn, like I saw Ronnie DeVoe talking about, we're finally getting to a point where we own Candy Girl, and it's 35, 40 years later.
Yeah.
And so they, there's so many lessons to be learned at this point where, like, I still feel sorry for these artists that get mistreated, and somebody tells them something, and it's like, hey, you should have read your contract.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, guys, come on, we got to do better, especially considering none of y'all are selling anything.
Facts.
Yeah.
Good clip though. It's a good clip.
Okay. Yeah, that was. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.